real-life Game of Thrones, history's bloodiest successions long before George R.R. Martin imagined the Iron Throne. Real kings and queens were slaughtering their way to power in succession battles that make fiction seem tame. From brothers poisoning brothers to mothers murdering sons, history's bloodiest successions reveal a simple truth. When it comes to absolute power, family means nothing, and survival means everything. Welcome to the real Game of Thrones, where the stakes weren't just a fictional crown, but the fate of empires, and where the losers didn't just lose their heads in metaphor, but literally lost them on the executioner's block. In the sprawling palaces of the Ottoman Empire, succession wasn't just complicated, it was a death sentence for everyone except the winner. The Ottoman sultans practiced what historians call fratricide by law, the legal requirement that new sultans murder all their male relatives to prevent civil war. When Mehmed III became sultan in 1595, his first act wasn't to address the empire's problems or meet with advisors. It was to order the execution of his 19 brothers. 19 princes, ranging from infants to teenagers, were strangled with silk cords in a single night, all to secure one man's grip on power. The Ottomans institutionalized what other dynasties did in secret. They believed that a sultan who hesitated to kill his own family was too weak to rule an empire. Better one strong ruler than 20 dead princes and a fractured realm. As the empire evolved, outright murder gave way to something arguably worse: the cage. Ottoman princes were confined to luxurious apartments within Topkapi Palace, cut off from the world, with no education in statecraft and no preparation for rule. They lived in gilded prison cells, knowing that their brother's death was their only path to freedom, or that their own death might come at any moment. The psychological toll was devastating. Ibrahim I, who became sultan in 1640 after spending 22 years in the cage, was so damaged by his imprisonment that he became known as Ibrahim the Mad. His reign was marked by paranoid executions, bizarre sexual obsessions, and economic collapse, the price of a succession system that valued security over sanity. 1,000 years before the Ottomans, the Byzantine Empire turned succession into an art form of betrayal. In Byzantium, being born to the purple, literally born in the purple-walled chamber reserved for imperial births, was supposed to guarantee your right to rule. Instead, it often guaranteed your death. Basil I, known as the Macedonian, founded a dynasty through a succession of murders so brazen that Byzantine chroniclers struggled to describe them diplomatically. Starting as a peasant groom, Basil murdered his way through the imperial hierarchy, killing his patron, his rival, and finally Emperor Michael III himself in 867 AD. Basil's genius was understanding that in Byzantium, legitimacy could be manufactured after the fact. Kill the right people, control the right ceremonies, and yesterday's murderer becomes today's divinely appointed emperor. The Byzantines perfected alternatives to execution that were arguably worse. Blinding was the preferred method of neutralizing rivals. A mutilated prince couldn't rule, but the emperor's conscience remained technically clean. Basil II ordered the blinding of 15,000 Bulgarian prisoners in 1014, leaving one man in every 100 with a single eye to guide the others home. Emperor Nicephorus II Phocas discovered that military genius was no protection against family ambition. In 969 AD, his own wife, Theophano, conspired with his nephew to murder him in his sleep. The White Death of the Saracens, as his enemies called him, was stabbed to death in his own bedroom by the woman who shared his bed. The Plantagenet dynasty of England turned family dysfunction into a 300-year bloodbath that consumed multiple generations. These weren't just succession disputes. They were total wars between parents and children, brothers and brothers, uncles and nephews. Henry II, one of England's most powerful kings, spent the last decades of his life fighting wars against his own sons. Henry the young king, Richard the Lionheart, and Geoffrey of Brittany repeatedly rebelled against their father, sometimes allying with France against their own kingdom. When Richard I died in 1199, his brother John faced a challenge from their 12-year-old nephew, Arthur of Brittany. John's solution was characteristically direct. He had the boy murdered and his body thrown into the Seine. The child's only crime was having a better claim to the throne than his uncle. The Plantagenets treated succession as a blood sport. They were willing to destroy their own kingdom, bankrupt their treasuries, and murder their own children rather than share power or follow traditional inheritance laws. Perhaps no Plantagenet succession was more brutal than Edward II's overthrow in 1327. His own wife, Isabella of France, and her lover Roger Mortimer deposed the king and had him murdered with a red-hot poker inserted into his bowels, a death designed to leave no external marks while causing maximum agony. The Plantagenet legacy climaxed in the Wars of the Roses, where two branches of the family, Lancaster and York, spent 30 years trying to exterminate each other. Entire generations of nobles died in battles like Toten, where contemporary accounts describe the dead lying as thick as leaves in autumn. In 6th century France, the Merovingian dynasty elevated royal women to new heights of political power and new depths of murderous ambition. These weren't weak medieval ladies waiting for rescue. They were queens who ordered assassinations from the throne and led armies into battle. The rivalry between Queens Brunhild and Fredegund turned personal vendetta into international warfare. For 40 years, these two women used their sons, their armies, and their assassins to wage a war that devastated Francia and left thousands dead. Fredegund's preferred weapon wasn't the sword, but the dagger in the dark. She ordered the assassination of King Sigebert, arranged the murder of Bishop Praetextatus during Mass, and allegedly poisoned her own husband when he became inconvenient. Her body count rivaled any medieval king's. Brunhild and Fredegund understood that in the Merovingian world, queens who didn't kill were queens who didn't survive. They turned motherhood itself into a weapon. Their sons were both their heirs and their armies. The feud ended in 613 when Brunhild, now in her 70s, was captured by her enemies. Her execution was designed to be as brutal as her life had been political. She was tied to wild horses and torn apart, a fate that shocked even the violence-hardened Franks. In imperial China, succession disputes could consume entire populations. The mandate of heaven might have provided divine legitimacy, but it took very earthly violence to claim and hold the dragon throne. Wu Zetian, China's only female emperor, murdered her way to power through a succession of family killings that would have impressed the Borgias. She allegedly strangled her own infant daughter and blamed the death on the Empress Wang, then systematically eliminated her rivals through poison, execution, and exile. The Inlushan Rebellion of 755 AD, triggered partly by succession disputes, killed an estimated 36 million people, roughly 1/6 of the world's population at the time. What began as a general's attempt to place his preferred candidate on the throne became one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. Chinese succession wars weren't just about changing dynasties. They were about rewriting the cosmic order. Emperors believed that killing their rivals wasn't just politically necessary. It was cosmically required to restore harmony between heaven and earth. The Manchu conquest that established the Qing dynasty involved massacres so extensive that entire cities were depopulated. Yangzhou, Jiating, and dozens of other cities saw their populations slaughtered as the new dynasty eliminated not just political rivals, but entire populations that might remember the old order. The Mughal Empire of India elevated succession warfare to an art form that combined Persian political intrigue with Mongol military brutality. Every Mughal succession was a winner-take-all battle where brothers fought brothers and sons rebelled against fathers. When Emperor Shah Jahan fell ill in 1657, his 4 sons immediately began a civil war that lasted 2 years and cost hundreds of thousands of lives. Aurangzeb, the 3rd son, proved the most ruthless. He defeated his brothers in battle, then had them executed, imprisoned his father, and ruled for nearly 50 years. Aurangzeb's treatment of his eldest brother, Darashikoh, revealed the personal cost of Mughal succession politics. Dara, a philosopher and poet, was paraded through Delhi in chains before being executed as a heretic. His head was sent to Aurangzeb as proof of death, brother to brother. Mughal succession wasn't just about political power. It was about religious authority, military command, and imperial legitimacy. The winner didn't just get the throne. He got to redefine what the empire meant and who belonged in it. Today, we take peaceful transitions of power for granted. Elections happen, leaders change, and the losers don't end up with their heads on spikes. But for most of human history, this was the exception, not the rule. The bloodiest successions in history reveal an uncomfortable truth about absolute power. It corrupts not just those who hold it, but those who seek it. When the stakes are literally life and death, when losing means not just political defeat but execution, exile, or torture, even family bonds dissolve in the acid of ambition. The Ottomans institutionalized fratricide because they understood that half measures led to civil wars. The Byzantines perfected the political murder because they knew that mercy was often mistaken for weakness. The Plantagenets turned family dinner into a war council because they lived in a world where your closest relative was your most dangerous enemy. These weren't aberrations or historical curiosities. They were the logical outcome of systems where power was absolute and succession was zero-sum. Every crown was won through violence, held through fear, and lost through betrayal. George R.R. Martin didn't invent the Game of Thrones. He simply recognized that throughout history, when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. And for every winner who claimed a crown, there were dozens of losers who paid the ultimate price. The real Game of Thrones wasn't fantasy. It was Tuesday in the royal courts of history. Their days were filled not with leisure and luxury, but with the constant, demanding work of ruling kingdoms and managing the complex relationships that held ancient civilizations together.